The CEO told a farm kid to fetch someone smart. He had no idea that kid was about to save his $1 million machine and ruin his ego. They say silence can be loud. That day in Des Moines, it screamed. It was supposed to be Greencore Industries' big moment, an outdoor product demo meant to show off their newest line of smart agricultural machinery. The latest model, a self-adjusting, AI-enhanced combine harvester they'd flown in from their Texas facility. Executives in sleek suits paced the gravel near the test field, sipping lukewarm coffee, while a small group of local farmers watched from the sidelines with crossed arms and skeptical eyes. Investors stood under the pop-up tents with clipboards and sunglasses, pretending they understood the soil. And at the center of it all stood Douglas Whitmore, CEO of Greencore. Sharp gray suit, expensive watch, and a voice that cut through the air like a whip. He didn't like the heat. He didn't like the dust. And he definitely didn't like delays. The combine started its programmed run, then hiccuped. A mechanical wheeze shot out from its side, then a loud metallic clunk. The machine rolled forward about 5 more feet and died right there in the dirt. For a few seconds, everyone stared. Some shifted on their heels. One of the investors let out an awkward chuckle, but Whitmore wasn't laughing. "What the hell just happened?" he barked, pointing at one of his engineers. The man, maybe late 30s, swallowed hard and jogged over to the side panel. He tapped at the control screen, unplugged something, then plugged it back in. Nothing. Whitmore stomped forward. "This thing cost over $1.2 million. Why isn't it running?" The engineer stammered something about a software calibration issue, but Whitmore didn't want excuses. He turned to a nearby group of local workers, teenagers and farmhands who'd come to help with setup. "You," he said, pointing at a lanky boy in mud-stained overalls, "go find someone who can fix this damn thing. I don't care if it's your uncle, your cousin, or your dog. Just get someone out here who knows what they're doing." The boy blinked, then stepped forward. "I can fix it," he said, calm, almost casual. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife through ripe fruit. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I said I can fix it, sir." The crowd turned toward him. He couldn't have been more than 17. His boots were caked in dirt. Oil stains ran up both sleeves of his plaid shirt, but his eyes, those were steady, confident. Whitmore gave a short, humorless laugh. "Kid," he said, shaking his head, "this isn't some busted lawnmower behind your barn. It's a $1 million machine with integrated AI and 4D terrain mapping. Go find someone who didn't fail high school shop class." The boy didn't move. He just looked down at the machine. Then he asked softly, "Can I take a look anyway?" But Whitmore wasn't ready for what this kid was about to show him. The boy's name was Caleb Morgan, 17, barely finished with junior year, and already working mornings before school and evenings after. Folks in town knew the Morgans, honest people, kept to themselves, ran a small patch of land just off County Road 58. Nothing fancy, just enough to pay the bills if the rain showed up when it was supposed to. Caleb wasn't the type to talk much. He wasn't loud like the other kids, didn't show off, didn't beg for attention, but put a busted motor in front of him and he lit up like a 4th of July firework. People said he got it from his dad, Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel Morgan, that was a name you didn't just forget if you'd been in the ag tech world more than 5 minutes. 10, 15 years back, he was the rising star of precision farming tech. A self-taught mechanical engineer who could build hydraulic systems out of junkyard scraps and make them run smoother than factory parts. No degree, no big fancy firm behind him. Just raw skill and a brain that saw machines the way some folks see numbers or sheet music. He'd been invited to summits, offered buyouts, begged to join think tanks. And then, just like that, he disappeared, turned down millions, walked away from all of it, packed up his family and bought a small farm outside Des Moines. Word was he had a falling out with a few suits on some board, burned bridges so thoroughly nothing ever crossed him again. Now he spent his days rebuilding old tractors, helping neighbors, and teaching his son everything he knew. That shed-out back looked like nothing more than a pile of corrugated metal and bolts from the outside. But inside, it was a wonderland of gears, processors, workbenches, and a half-dismantled combine engine they'd been upgrading together for months. Caleb wasn't just some random farm kid poking around in machines. He could diagram a hydraulic relay system in his sleep. He'd written his own firmware updates on an old laptop with a missing key. He didn't just understand the tech, he felt it. And that's why, when the Green Core machine locked up in front of all those investors and Whitmore dismissed him like he was a fly in his soup, Caleb didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Can I take a look?" Whitmore rolled his eyes and turned to his assistant. "Fine. Let him play around. Maybe the damn thing will start out of pity." There was a short pause as Caleb stepped forward. A few whispers rippled through the crowd. Some of the older engineers looked annoyed, others curious. Caleb crouched beside the machine, pulled out a small multi-tool from his back pocket, slid open the side panel without yanking or forcing it, like he knew exactly where to press. He scanned the wiring, checked the module ports, fingers moving fast, but with intention. One of the Green Core engineers muttered, "This is going to be a joke." Another said, "Kid's going to electrocute himself." But Caleb was in his own world. He unplugged one line, reconnected it to a secondary port, held down a reset node for 10 seconds, and flipped a small toggle on the servo controller. Then he stood up. "Try it now," he said. The engineer hesitated. "Go ahead," Caleb repeated. The man climbed into the cab, hit the ignition, and, without a single sputter, the machine came to life. The massive front reel rotated. The monitor flickered green. A low mechanical rhythm filled the air. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was stunned. Whitmore blinked. One of the investors leaned forward. Did that kid just fix a prototype in 5 minutes? Another engineer checked the control screen again, then checked the wiring. He bypassed the default firmware check, rerouted the power loop. I didn't even know that was possible with this model. Caleb just stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. Whitmore cleared his throat. "What's your name again?" "Caleb Morgan." Whitmore's brows knit. Morgan? But he still didn't know who Caleb really was, or what kind of mistake he made years ago. Whitmore took a step closer, eyes narrowing, like he was trying to see something behind Caleb's face. "Morgan," he said again, slower this time. "You related to Ezekiel Morgan?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The silence did it for him. One of the investors, a short man in a polo with an embroidered hedge fund logo, muttered, "Wait, is he that Morgan?" Another guy whispered back, "The one who flipped off the Green Core board and walked away? Thought he disappeared." Caleb looked up, not smug, not arrogant, just calm. "He's my dad." Whitmore's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Years ago, before Green Core had satellites monitoring soil density or drones doing crop inspections, they were a much smaller outfit. And back then, Ezekiel Morgan had been the guy they paraded around like a trophy. A genius, an outsider who made magic with machines. But Ezekiel didn't play politics. He didn't care about investor dinners, didn't care about shaving costs if it meant compromising performance. And when he found out Green Core was cutting corners on a control system he'd designed, replacing key materials with cheaper parts to maximize quarterly margins, he pushed back, hard. He sent internal emails, raised the red flag in meetings, and when no one listened, he leaked the schematics, not to hurt the company, but to warn the farmers, the people who'd be using those machines in their fields, whose safety depended on those controls working the way they were supposed to. Green Core tried to spin it, said the schematics were outdated, blamed it on development confusion. But Whitmore, who had just stepped into the CEO role back then, took it personally. He made sure Ezekiel was blacklisted. Every major ag tech firm got the message. Don't hire him. Don't touch him. Don't even quote his name. And Ezekiel didn't fight it. He left. No lawsuit, no press tour. He packed his tools, bought a few acres of land, and poured everything he had into raising his son right, teaching him the old ways and the new, making sure someone would know how to do it better, now that someone had just saved Whitmore's demo in front of half the Midwest's agricultural elite. Whitmore finally found his voice. "Your father still around?" Caleb nodded once. "Yeah, he's at home, probably fixing the irrigation system." There was a strange moment then. Whitmore didn't say anything. He didn't apologize. Didn't thank him, just turned toward his assistant and muttered something under his breath. Caleb could have gloated, could have rubbed it in, but he didn't. He just turned to walk away. "Hold on," one of the engineers called out. "What did you do exactly? That fix, how'd you know?" Caleb turned back, shrugged. "There's a voltage drain in your auxiliary power relay. When the machine heats up too fast in direct sunlight, it draws from the wrong port and stalls the OS boot. You've got the logic reversed in the failsafe check. Swapped it to bypass and rerouted the fallback to the manual override." The engineer just stared. Another investor whispered, "That kid just explained a firmware-level issue in plain English." Caleb gave a small smile. "It's how my dad taught me. If you can't explain it to a farmer with grease on his hands, you don't understand it yourself." That line stuck. A few folks even nodded, but while the crowd started shifting their attention back to the machine, Whitmore was already planning something else. After the crowd calmed and the machine purred like it had never broken down, Whitmore pulled out his phone. His assistant leaned in. "What now?" she asked quietly. Whitmore's jaw clenched. "We need to talk to Ezekiel." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Last time you two—" "I know what happened last time. Just find a number, or an address, something." But someone else got there first. Caleb had already texted his dad. He didn't send much, just fixed it. He was there. Back at the Morgan farm, Ezekiel stood in the doorway of that shed, the same one where he and Caleb spent years rebuilding engines, boards, even an old planter turned autonomous just for fun. He looked at the message, then slid the phone back into his pocket and wiped his hands on a rag. He wasn't mad. He wasn't even surprised. He knew this day would come. It didn't take long for a black SUV to roll up their gravel driveway later that evening. The tires kicked up chalky dust, settling on the porch steps. Ezekiel was already sitting outside, wearing a worn ball cap, a thermos in one hand, a quiet look in his eyes. Whitmore stepped out, alone this time. He walked up slow, almost cautious, like he was approaching something that might bite. "Ezekiel." "Douglas." They hadn't spoken in nearly 12 years. Not a call, not a message, not even a second-hand word, just silence. Whitmore took off his sunglasses and looked around at the modest house, the fields, the old rusting grain cart by the barn. "You really walked away from all of it," he said, almost to himself. Ezekiel nodded. "Wasn't much worth staying for." Whitmore scratched the back of his neck. "Your boy's got your brain." "Better," Ezekiel said. "Didn't have to unlearn everything like I did." There was a beat of silence. Whitmore finally sat down on the porch rail, resting one hand on his knee. "Look, about back then, the board thought you were—" "Don't do that," Ezekiel cut in, his voice firm. "Don't pass the blame around like loose bolts in a parts drawer. You knew what they were doing. You went along with it. I tried to fix it. You tried to bury it." Whitmore didn't argue. "I did," he admitted. "We had investors breathing down our necks. I chose profit." Ezekiel didn't smile, didn't frown either. "I know." Whitmore looked out at the field. "I didn't expect him to show up today." He didn't show up. He just did what was right. Something breaks. He fixes it. Simple. You taught him that. "No," Ezekiel said. "Life did." There was another pause. Then Whitmore turned toward him. "I want to offer him a spot. Internship. Maybe a fast track once he finishes school. Full ride if he wants to study. He's got something rare." Ezekiel sipped from his thermos, unbothered. "Maybe he does, but that's not your decision to make." Whitmore gave a half smile. "You going to stop him?" "Why would I?" Ezekiel stood up, slow and steady. "He knows what you did to me. He still helped you. I didn't raise him to hold grudges. You raised him better than we deserved." Ezekiel looked Whitmore dead in the eye. "I raised him to know the difference between respect and recognition." But what came next wasn't up to Ezekiel, because Caleb had already made his decision. The next morning, Caleb stood in the same field where it all happened. The machine was gone, hauled back to Green Corps' facility for diagnostics and further optimization, whatever that meant. But the buzz hadn't died down. Everyone was talking, at the feed store, at the diner, even at church that Sunday. Whitmore had made an official statement that night, calling Caleb a bright young mind with a future in agricultural innovation. He didn't say much more than that, but folks could read between the lines. Caleb knew what was coming. So when his dad stepped into the kitchen holding a freshly printed letter from Green Corps' HR department, He didn't look surprised. They're offering a full scholarship, Ezekiel said. Tuition, housing, everything. And they want you interning in R&D next summer. Caleb didn't say anything for a second. He just kept looking down at the toast he hadn't touched. You want it? His father asked. Caleb shrugged. I don't know. Why not? Because I don't know if it's real, or if they're just doing it to clean up their image after yesterday. Ezekiel nodded slowly. He didn't sugarcoat it. They probably are. That caught Caleb off guard. So you think I shouldn't take it? I didn't say that, his father replied. But I want you to think about this. What do you want your work to mean? Not theirs, yours. Caleb looked back at the letter, at the polished logo in the corner, at the smooth, corporate wording. They didn't even say sorry, he muttered. Ezekiel chuckled under his breath. Son, people like Whitmore, they don't apologize out loud. They apologize through opportunity. Doesn't make it right, but that's how they operate. There was a long pause before Caleb finally said, He looked nervous when he realized who I was. Good, Ezekiel said without hesitation. He should be. But what if I go there and they just use me, parade me around like a token genius from the dirt roads of Iowa? Ezekiel leaned forward. Then you show them who you are, not just where you're from, not just who raised you. You show them you. Because the truth is, you fixed that machine in 5 minutes, and they still don't really understand how you did it. That's power. They'll need you more than you'll ever need them. That was the first time Caleb smiled all morning. Later that week, he sent in his answer. Short, polite, clear. I'll accept the scholarship, but I'm coming in as myself, not as your PR campaign. He didn't get a reply right away, but a few days later, an envelope came in the mail. No fancy logos, just a handwritten note, barely 2 lines. You earned your place, and maybe I misjudged your father. DW, Caleb read it once, then slid it into a drawer without a word. Later that night, while most kids his age were scrolling through their phones or arguing about prom dates, he was back in the shed, rewiring the guidance system on an old Harvester GPS panel. His dad worked beside him, silent but present. No congratulations, no celebration, just work, the same way it had always been. But Green Corps wasn't done with him yet, and someone in that company saw more in Caleb than even he realized. 3 weeks later, a black car showed up again, but it wasn't Whitmore this time. The man who stepped out was younger, late 30s maybe, clean haircut, tan blazer, white sneakers, not from around here. You could tell by the way he looked at the gravel driveway like it was a hazard. He introduced himself as Darius Kenner, VP of Advanced Systems at Green Corps. Ezekiel met him at the fence line. Darius was polite, but direct. I'm here for Caleb. He's in the shed, Ezekiel said. If you're here to throw more shiny things at him, you'll want to wait till he finishes what he's working on. Darius smirked. He always liked that. Since the first time he opened a toolbox. Darius waited, watched a few crows picking at the field. Mind if I ask you something? He said. Ezekiel shrugged. You can ask. Why'd you never go back after what happened? You could have taken the payout, fought the board, started your own company. Ezekiel looked over at the shed. I figured if I built something real, something that lasted, I didn't need to win a fight that didn't matter anymore. Darius nodded like he understood, but didn't really. Caleb finally came out, wiping his hands on a rag. You're Darius? Yeah, I saw the demo footage and the sensor logs. You didn't just patch it, you improved the routing logic. That change has been submitted for integration into our next OS update. I wasn't trying to fix Green Corps' firmware, Caleb said. I was trying to stop your machine from stalling in the middle of a field. That's exactly why I'm here. Darius pulled out a folder. Inside were blueprints, diagrams, code excerpts. We've got a prototype we're not even letting half the company touch. Next-gen autonomous cultivator, no steering wheel, all AI. Needs a brain, not just hands. I want you on the team, not next year, now. Caleb blinked. I haven't even graduated. You don't need a degree when you already know how to teach the people writing the textbooks. Caleb didn't answer right away. Ezekiel stepped back, letting his son think. Darius didn't pressure him, just said, It's your call. This isn't about PR. I'm not Whitmore. I build things, and I think you're the real deal. He handed Caleb the folder and turned to leave. Deadline's open. Call me when you're ready. That night, Caleb sat on the porch flipping through the documents. The schematics were beautiful, messy, raw, unfinished, but they had life in them. Ezekiel came out and sat beside him, sipping from his thermos like always. You thinking about saying yes? I don't know. It's everything I've ever wanted. Then what's stopping you? Caleb stared out at the field. I don't want to just fix their messes. I want to build something of my own. Something people like us can actually afford. Something that works out here, not just on paper. Ezekiel nodded. Then maybe that's the start of it. Learn how they do it. Take what you need. Leave the rest. Would you go back if you were me? Ezekiel was quiet for a long time. I wouldn't go back, he finally said. But I'd go forward. Just not blind. Caleb sat with that for a while. The next day he called Darius. I'll do it, he said, but only on one condition. What's that? You don't treat me like some golden goose. You put me on a team. You give me problems to solve. Real ones. And if I see something wrong, I say it, and you listen. Darius didn't hesitate. Done. Caleb hung up. Later that afternoon, he returned to the shed. Not to pack, not to say goodbye, just to finish what he started. Because one day, when he built his own machine, he wanted to be sure it never broke down in the middle of someone else's big moment. But what Caleb didn't realize was how far his name would travel, and how long people had been watching. 6 months later, Caleb Morgan stood under the bright fluorescence of a Green Corps testing bay in Flagstaff, Arizona. It was nothing like the fields back home. Dry air, red dirt, a wide open sky that made you feel small. But inside that hangar, Caleb was anything but small. He wasn't an intern anymore. Wasn't the kid who fixed the harvester. He had his own desk, his own badge, and most importantly, his own ideas. The prototype they were building, it wasn't perfect, not even close. But every line of code, every wiring reroute, every piece of modified tech that made the machine a little smarter, a little sturdier, that was him. He kept his head down, did the work, spoke when it mattered. Darius kept his word too. He backed him when the older engineers rolled their eyes. When one tried to rewrite Caleb's schematic without asking, Darius shut it down cold. And back home, Ezekiel kept the shed open. Still working, still tinkering, still answering Caleb's late-night calls when something didn't sit right in a system loop. But then, one morning, an email. Subject: Feature piece request. Caleb Morgan, from Board Communications, Green Corps. They wanted to tell Caleb's story. PR, of course. Use his name, his background. Show the world how Green Corps found the next generation of innovation right in America's heartland. Caleb sat with it for hours. He didn't reply right away. When he finally did, it was one sentence. You didn't find me. I walked in. The story didn't run. Instead, Caleb asked for something else. Funding. Not for him, for a project. A machine that cost a third of what Green Corps charged. One that small farmers, real ones, could afford. No unnecessary bells, no sleek finish, just honest function. They said no. So Caleb started working on it anyway, nights, weekends, after hours. He called it the red clay model, a nod to the dirt in his shed back home. Word started to spread, quietly, through people, not press. Farmers talking to farmers, engineers talking to suppliers. And then, one day, out of nowhere, Whitmore called. Caleb didn't answer at first. He let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of him, so he finally picked up. Caleb, Whitmore said, voice stiff, like it still hurt to be the one asking questions. I heard about your side project. Not a side project, Caleb said. Just a project you didn't want to fund. Whitmore let that hang. I want to license it. Bring it under Green Corps. No, Caleb said flatly. Name your price. It's not for sale. You could reach 10 times the market with our platform. I'm trying to reach the people you skipped over. Silence. Then Whitmore asked something unexpected. What would your father do? Caleb didn't hesitate. He'd say I was wasting time talking to a man who only shows up when something's already working. Then he hung up. A year later, the red clay model launched at a county fair in Tulsa. Not a tech conference, not a polished convention center, just a dusty lot, paper banners, free hot dogs, and real people. And yet, word got out. A line of buyers wrapped around the field. Ezekiel was there, sitting under a small tent holding a styrofoam cup of sweet tea, watching his son explain the system to an old man in overalls who said he hadn't been able to afford new equipment in over a decade. "You built this?" the man asked. "Yes, sir," Caleb said. "Built it for people like you." No press, no cameras, just truth. That night, Ezekiel and Caleb sat together at the edge of the fairground, lights dimming, people packing up. "You proud of it?" Ezekiel asked. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, not just the machine, the idea behind it." "You should be, not because it works, but because you remembered who it's for." They sat in silence after that. Not awkward, not heavy, just enough. The kind of quiet that doesn't scream. It speaks. We often chase success thinking it lives in big titles, fancy offices, or people with expensive suits, but sometimes it's the ones in dusty boots, fixing things because they care, not for credit, not for attention, who change everything. Remember that the next time someone tells you you're just a kid, or just from a small place, or just not the right fit, don't wait for permission. Build it anyway.